You know what everyone gets wrong about making a man chase you? They think it's all about playing hard to get, using jealousy to trigger his competitive instinct, or following those ridiculous texting rules where you wait exactly 72 minutes to respond. But here's the truth that most people miss. What actually makes a man pursue you has nothing to do with these manipulation tactics. It's about understanding the psychology of genuine detachment. Think about it. When you're constantly focused on someone, analyzing their every text, rearranging your schedule to fit theirs, and mentally tracking how long it's been since they reached out, they can feel that energy. They can sense that pressure, that expectation, that need for their validation. And that's precisely what kills attraction. Not your interest itself, but the emotional dependency you create through your pursuit. A woman who truly inspires chase isn't one who's pretending to be unavailable. She's someone who genuinely lives with independence and self-fulfillment, making her attention rare but meaningful when given. She understands that true attraction grows in the space between two people, not in the clinging or constant presence. Think about the most magnetically attractive people you've ever met in your life. They're not the ones desperately seeking approval or validation from others. They're the ones so completely immersed in their own lives, so fulfilled by their own pursuits, that being part of their world feels like a privilege rather than a right. That's not about playing games or following strategies. That's about genuine self-possession and living authentically. When you truly stop caring about the outcome with a man, something fundamental shifts in how he perceives you. You're no longer just someone pursuing his attention. You become the woman he feels compelled to earn. You transform into the emotional challenge he can't stop thinking about when you're not around. But here's what's absolutely critical to understand. This approach isn't about manipulation or faking disinterest. Men have remarkable intuition for detecting insincerity. This is about creating genuine independence that taps into his deepest psychological needs he might not even consciously realize he has until you stop trying so hard to fulfill them. What makes this psychological shift so powerful is that it creates emotional contrast, that space between being wanted and needing to be wanted. And that space is precisely where desire grows, because human nature is consistent. We don't chase what's constantly chasing us. We pursue what feels just beyond our reach. Not impossible to attain, but requiring genuine effort and investment. When you genuinely detach from needing his validation, you become exactly that, the woman he suddenly feels motivated to pursue. Let me be absolutely clear about something. This isn't about playing mind games or treating someone poorly. It's about understanding the psychology of healthy attachment and using that knowledge to create relationships with proper polarity and mutual respect. This is about becoming the kind of woman who values herself enough that a man recognizes he needs to bring his best self to deserve your attention. Some of you might be thinking, but shouldn't I just show him how much I care? Isn't honesty the foundation of any good relationship? Absolutely, authenticity is essential. But there's a profound difference between expressing interest and demonstrating emotional dependency. It's like the difference between offering someone a beautiful gift versus begging them to accept it. Both involve giving, but one creates desire while the other creates obligation. One feels like a choice, the other feels like pressure. So let's talk about the first psychological shift that creates genuine detachment. This is what I call the emotional refocus. And it looks something like this. Intentionally redirecting your emotional energy back into your own life rather than pouring it all into a relationship that's barely begun. Now, most people make the critical mistake of trying to pretend they're busy or unavailable when dating someone new. They'll say things like, I'm just not going to text him for 3 days, or I'll wait until he reaches out first. There's nothing inherently wrong with creating space, but this approach doesn't create genuine attraction because it's still centered around him. Your thoughts are still consumed by him. Your actions are still determined by him. You're just doing the opposite of whatever your instinct tells you to do. What actually makes a man chase you is when your emotional energy is authentically invested elsewhere in your passions, your purpose, your people. When you're genuinely engaged with the richness of your own life rather than strategically pretending to be. Let me share a real example. I was coaching a woman named Jessica who was constantly checking her phone, analyzing his texts word by word, and rearranging her schedule at a moment's notice for a man who was giving minimum effort. Their typical pattern was he would text, sometimes days after their last communication, usually late in the evening, asking if she wanted to hang out. Despite having plans or needing rest, she would almost always say yes, canceling on friends or staying out much later than was good for her, because she was afraid of missing an opportunity to connect with him. When we dug deeper into her patterns, I noticed something crucial. Her entire emotional world revolved around his next move. Her mood, her plans, her sense of worth, all hanging on whether he reached out or not. She was fully available physically, emotionally, and mentally, not because this was a conscious choice that honored her needs, but because she was afraid any boundary might push him away. I suggested that instead of pretending to be busy as a tactic, she actually refocus on the passions she'd neglected since meeting him. The photography project she'd abandoned when dating took over her free time. The friend connections she'd been postponing to keep her schedule open for last-minute dates. The career opportunity she'd been too distracted to pursue because her thoughts were consumed with relationship anxiety. This wasn't about manufacturing scarcity. It was about reclaiming the fullness of her life. It wasn't about tricking him into thinking she was busy. It was about actually becoming genuinely engaged with her own existence again. The next time he reached out with a last-minute invitation, the kind she would have normally dropped everything for, instead of playing games or pretending to be busy, she simply said, "I'm in the middle of a photography project I'm really excited about. I'd love to see you this weekend though if you want to make plans." There was no manipulation in this response, no strategy, no game, just her authentic truth delivered warmly and clearly. His reaction? The dynamic completely shifted. He started texting her more frequently, making actual plans in advance. 3 weeks later, he was asking where they stood and whether she was seeing other people, something he'd carefully avoided discussing for months. But the most important change wasn't in his behavior, it was in hers. For the first time since they'd met, she was evaluating whether this relationship actually added to her life rather than desperately trying to secure his interest. Why did this work? Because she wasn't just creating artificial scarcity. She was genuinely redirecting her emotional energy. The fulfillment she felt wasn't fake, it was real, and he could sense that shift. He started thinking, she has a full, engaging life that doesn't revolve around me, and I want to be part of it. And that's exactly what the emotional refocus does. It creates a scenario where he feels your authentic engagement with life, not your strategic disinterest in him. This principle works because it addresses one of the biggest attraction killers in relationships, the energy of need. When your happiness, your sense of worth, your emotional state all depend on someone else's behavior, it creates a heaviness that most people instinctively pull away from. But when you shift your emotional focus back to your own life, you replace that heaviness with a lightness that people naturally gravitate toward. The second psychological shift that creates genuine attraction is what I call outcome detachment. And it might surprise you because it's not about what you do, but about the energy behind what you do. This mindset is, I would love for this to work out, but my happiness doesn't depend on it. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, that sounds too simple or maybe even too passive. How could simply changing your internal thought process possibly make someone chase you? But here's the psychology behind it. Most people make the critical mistake of emotional forecasting. They meet someone promising and immediately project far into the future, mentally planning the relationship, envisioning introductions to friends and family, even picturing a life together before truly knowing the person. And in doing so, they create an emotional investment that feels heavy to the other person. This premature investment isn't just happening in your head, it's leaking into your interactions in countless subtle ways. It shows up in the slightly too eager text responses. It reveals itself in the excessive accommodation of their schedule. It manifests in the careful monitoring of their social media. It comes through in the analysis of every word they say, looking for clues about their feelings. All of this creates a pressure that makes what could be a light, enjoyable connection feel weighted with unspoken expectations. One of the biggest mistakes I see is when someone meets a promising new man and immediately shifts their emotional state to depend on that relationship working out. It comes from a place of hope and excitement, which are beautiful emotions, but what you're actually doing is creating an energy of need rather than choice. You're subtly communicating, "I've already decided you're the one," before really knowing you, which paradoxically makes them feel not chosen but assumed. This second principle is powerful because it does something counterintuitive. It allows you to be fully present and engaged while simultaneously being completely at peace with things not working out. It creates an emotional freedom that makes spending time with you feel like a genuine choice rather than managing your expectations. I worked with a client named Michelle who was always anxiously attached to outcomes in relationships. She'd meet someone, feel a connection, and immediately become invested in making it work. She'd plan her week around potential dates, overthink every text, and enter every interaction with an energy of "please like me back" that she couldn't hide no matter how she tried. Her pattern was consistent, intense connections that would flourish initially, but quickly become tense as the man felt the weight of her unspoken expectations. The more she sensed him pulling away, the more she would pursue, creating a negative cycle that inevitably led to painful endings that reinforced her fear of abandonment. I challenged her to adopt a genuine mindset of, "I would love for this to work, but I'll be absolutely fine if it doesn't before her next date." Not as a technique or strategy, but as a true internal shift. We worked on reconnecting her to the fullness of her life outside of romantic relationships, reminding her of her resilience through past disappointments, and building her sense of inherent worthiness that didn't depend on any one person's response to her. She called me afterward amazed. I was more myself than I've ever been on a first date. I wasn't filtering or trying to be perfect. I asked questions I really wanted to know the answers to rather than questions I thought would make me seem interesting. I disagreed when I actually disagreed instead of pretending to share his opinions. And here's the crazy part. He's already asked me out again, saying he felt like he could really talk to me. This had never happened before in her dating life. By releasing the need for a particular outcome, she created space for authentic connection. But, and this is crucial, this isn't about pretending not to care when you do. That kind of inauthenticity is transparent and ultimately backfires. This is about genuinely being okay with whatever happens because you know your worth doesn't depend on any one person's response to you. The beauty of this outcome detachment is that it communicates multiple messages at once. You're confident in your value, you're discerning about who you spend time with, and you're emotionally mature enough to handle things not working out. That combination is intoxicating for a man who's used to feeling either pursued or managed in relationships. When you detach from needing a specific outcome with someone, you actually become more present with them. You can really see them rather than just seeing your hopes projected onto them. You can evaluate if they're truly right for you rather than trying to make them right for you. You can enjoy the unfolding connection for what it is rather than anxiously pushing it toward what you want it to be. Now let's talk about the third shift, the most powerful one of all. This is what I call the standards reality, and it manifests as making decisions based on how someone treats you rather than how much you like them. This shift works on such a profound level because it speaks to one of a man's core emotional needs, the need to earn your affection, to feel that your attention is valuable and must be deserved. When you operate from this mindset, you're not just setting boundaries, you're recognizing your own worth in a way that commands respect. You're creating a relationship dynamic where your attention is something valuable to be earned rather than something freely given, regardless of how you're treated. But there's a critical distinction here between having rigid rules and having genuine standards. Having rules is saying, I won't text him first for at least 3 days, or I'll always end the date first no matter how much I'm enjoying it. That's about game playing. It's about external behaviors designed to manipulate outcomes rather than authentic expressions of self-worth. Having standards is about consistently honoring how you deserve to be treated, regardless of how attracted you are to someone. It's saying, I expect clear communication. I value consistency. I need to be treated with basic courtesy and respect. It's about making choices based on someone's actions rather than their potential or your feelings about them. I remember working with a woman named Sophia who was deeply interested in a man who was hot and cold with his attention. One week he'd be all in, making plans and staying in consistent contact. The next week he'd practically disappear, only to resurface with last-minute invitations that she'd eagerly accept. She'd been tolerating this inconsistency, these cancelled plans without reschedules, and these breadcrumbs of affection because she was so attracted to him. Her attraction was overriding her standards. When we delved deeper into her patterns, I discovered she had actually been ignoring several behaviors that didn't align with how she fundamentally believed relationships should work. She valued reliability but was accepting unpredictability. She believed in mutual effort but was putting in 80% while accepting his 20%. She wanted open communication but was settling for cryptic texts and unexplained absences. After we worked on strengthening her sense of self-worth, one evening, after yet another cancelled plan, without a reschedule, she simply said, "I really enjoy spending time with you, but I need consistency in my relationships. I'm looking for someone who's clear about their interest and makes spending time together a priority." There was no ultimatum in her tone, no punishment, no emotional manipulation, just a clear, calm statement of what she needed in a relationship. She wasn't trying to change him or force him to behave differently. She was simply letting him know what worked for her and what didn't, with the unspoken understanding that she was prepared to walk away if her needs weren't met. She told me later that he completely changed his approach, becoming reliably communicative and deliberate with plans. 2 months later, he told her he'd never respected a woman more for knowing her worth. He admitted that with other women in the past, he'd fallen into patterns of minimal effort because it was allowed, but her clear standards actually made him want to rise to meet them. What makes this shift so compelling is that it's not something men encounter often. Men are typically used to women who either completely write them off for the slightest misstep or accept whatever treatment is offered if they're attracted enough. But when you maintain high interest while simultaneously requiring respectful treatment, it creates a dynamic that feels both desirable and earned. When you truly embody this principle, you stop asking questions like, "Why isn't he texting me back?" or "Why did he cancel our plans again?" Instead, you ask, "Is this the kind of relationship dynamic that honors my worth?" And when the answer is no, you don't try to change him or strategize how to make him treat you better. You simply communicate your standard once, and then you're willing to walk away if it's not met. Now that you understand these 3 powerful psychological shifts, let's talk about how to implement them effectively, because mindset and timing are everything. The most powerful internal changes can be undermined if they come from a place of strategy rather than genuine self-worth. First, understand that these shifts are not techniques to be deployed as tactics. They're not lines to memorize or behaviors to perform temporarily until you hook someone. They're internal recalibrations that change how you show up in relationships at the most fundamental level. The exact behaviors matter less than the authentic energy behind them and the consistency with which you embody them. This is where the caution part comes in. Many people hear about approaches like these and immediately want to use them as manipulation tactics, as if they're casting a spell to make someone chase them. They think, if I just act like I don't care, he'll want me more. Or if I pretend to be busy, he'll value my time. But relationships aren't magic tricks. They're living, breathing connections that require authenticity. So here's my first caution. Never pretend to not care when you do. Men have an incredible radar for inauthenticity. If you're performing detachment while actually obsessing over his every move, not only will it fail to create attraction, it will damage trust. These principles work precisely because they come from a place of genuine self-worth. Second, understand that this isn't about becoming cold or unavailable. You can be warm, expressive, and authentic while still maintaining healthy detachment from outcomes and strong personal standards. In fact, the combination of warmth with healthy boundaries is what creates truly magnetic attraction. Timing and application are crucial as well. The first shift, emotional refocus, should be implemented immediately and continuously. This isn't something you do for a week to get his attention. It's about genuinely rebuilding your relationship with yourself, recommitting to the passions and purposes that make your life meaningful with or without romantic partnership. The second shift, outcome detachment, works best when you're actually interacting with him. It allows you to be fully present without the anxiety that often accompanies romantic connections. It lets you truly listen rather than strategizing your next move. It enables you to be authentic rather than calculating. As for the third shift around standards, this should be enforced consistently whenever a boundary is crossed, not as punishment, but as a calm statement of what works for you. It should be communicated with compassion rather than emotional reactivity, with clarity rather than accusations. Something else to remember, these shifts aren't just about how you act when you're with him. They're about how you live when you're apart. Are you checking your phone obsessively? Are you discussing every detail of your interactions with friends? Are you mentally rehearsing future conversations? Or are you genuinely immersed in your own life, maintaining perspective about this relationship as just one part of your rich and meaningful existence? The power of these principles comes not just from your external behaviors, but from your internal reality. A woman can say all the right things, create the perfect amount of space, communicate clear standards, but if her inner world is still revolving around him, that energy will inevitably leak through and undermine the authentic detachment that creates true attraction. There's something else I want you to understand about these psychological shifts. They're not just about making him chase you. They're not just about creating temporary attraction or securing short-term interest. They're about creating the kind of relationship dynamic where chase happens naturally because both people value each other. Because true pursuit isn't about game playing or manipulation. It's not about tricks or tactics that eventually wear off. It's about creating such a profound sense of worth that earning your attention feels meaningful and valuable. Think about the relationships in your life that have brought you the most joy and fulfillment. They weren't the ones where you were constantly anxious or trying to secure someone's interest. They weren't the ones where you were walking on eggshells or strategizing your next move. They were the ones where you felt confident in your value, where you knew you were choosing them rather than needing them, where the connection felt mutual rather than desperate. That's what these shifts help create, not just pursuit, but meaningful connection. And that's why I want to emphasize something important. These principles are powerful tools, but they're not substitutes for compatibility. If you're using them with someone who fundamentally doesn't appreciate you, who isn't emotionally available, who doesn't want the same things you do, no psychological shift in the world will create a healthy relationship. It might create temporary chase, but not the lasting connection you deserve. I've seen women master these principles, only to use them on men who were never capable of meeting their needs in the first place. The shift created initial interest, even pursuit, but eventually the fundamental incompatibility resurfaced. Because while these principles can transform dynamics, they can't transform character or core values. Use these approaches with someone who already shows potential, who demonstrates basic respect, who seems genuinely interested, but perhaps hasn't fully invested yet. That's when they become truly transformative, when they bring out the best in what's already there, rather than trying to create something from nothing. And remember that while these shifts create powerful dynamics, what sustains a relationship over time is mutual value and respect. It's not just about creating chase, it's about who you are every day. It's about maintaining your standards, continuing to nurture your independent life, and showing up authentically in the relationship. A man doesn't continue pursuing simply because you're detached. He continues pursuing a woman who consistently demonstrates her value, who knows what she brings to the table, who can express genuine interest without compromising her sense of self. That's the balance that creates not just temporary fascination, but lasting commitment. I worked with a client named Rachel who had mastered these principles and created a beautiful relationship with a man who truly valued her. When I asked her what made their connection different from her past relationships, she said something profound. In the past, I was so focused on keeping someone's interest that I lost interest in myself. Now I'm with someone who's drawn to my passion for life, not my desperation for love. That's the essence of what happens when you stop caring in the way most people think about relationships. You don't stop caring about connection. You don't stop caring about love. You simply stop caring about controlling outcomes you never could control in the first place. You stop caring about securing someone else's interest at the expense of your own well-being. You stop caring about being chosen and start caring about choosing well. So yes, these three psychological shifts can create powerful changes in how men respond to you. They can transform how he sees you from someone he takes for granted to someone he feels motivated to pursue. They can tap into his need for healthy challenge in a way that pedestals and pursuit never will. But their true power comes from the authenticity behind them. When you genuinely embody these principles, when they come from a place of self-worth rather than strategic calculation, that's when they become transformative. The woman who inspires Chase isn't trying to manipulate with her behavior. She's simply living from a place of genuine self-value. She's investing in her own life, remaining open but unattached to outcomes, and maintaining standards that honor her worth. That kind of authentic self-possession doesn't just make a man chase you, it creates the kind of relationship that both people desire, where you're not just pursued, but truly valued, not just wanted in the moment, but respected for a lifetime. And that's not just about the thrill of the chase, that's about creating love that lasts. Because ultimately, the goal isn't to be chased forever. The goal is to create a relationship where both people are so consistently choosing each other day after day that the question of pursuit becomes irrelevant, where the dynamic isn't about who's chasing whom, but about two whole people building something meaningful together. When you stop caring about securing someone's interest and start caring about honoring your own worth, you don't just change how men respond to you, you change the kind of relationship you're capable of creating. You transform not just his perception of you, but your perception of yourself. And that is the most powerful shift of all.